Hey there, writer rebels. Today we're going to try something a little bit different, and I'm going to talk to you about how I outline a book. Hey there, everyone. It's me, Scarlett Kol, young adult author, YouTuber, and storyteller, and today I'm here to talk about outlining. So why am I talking about outlining today? Well, I am working on the third book in my Faraway High series. So I have Falling and Dreamer, and I am working on the third book, which is called Fierce, and it is a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses. But the whole thing about that is I need to outline the book before I write it. I am a plancer. I do some discovery writing in certain scenes and whatever, but generally I've stuck to using an outline whenever I can. So there's two reasons that I do that. Number one is because sometimes I have to step away from the project. I'm not a full-time writer like a lot of people out there probably. I have other commitments like a lot of people out there. So sometimes I have to step away from my project, and an outline makes it really easy for me to be able to come back to that project a little bit later and know exactly where I left off. The second reason is because I kind of have this thing in my brain, and if you've been watching my vlogs, I'm one of those people that struggles when they know something isn't working. So if I have a plot and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to end, or if I have something that just isn't quite working, the words come very, very slow for me. And then as soon as I solve all of those problems, the words come in a tidal wave. So if you are a person like that, outlining can be a huge, huge tool because it allows you to answer your questions and solve your problems before you start writing those words on the page. So we are going to get into what my outlining system is. It's very simple, and it's something that anybody can do regardless of what system that they use to plot their stories. So before I jump into that, I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of my subscribers who keep coming back week after week. And if you're not a subscriber, make sure you're hitting that subscription bar and the notification bell below this video to let YouTube know that you want to see more of my content. While you're down there, you can also hit that thumbs up button so that they know that this video is worth watching. Subscriber or not, anytime you hit that like button, when you leave comments, or you subscribe to my channel, it definitely helps me out as it lets YouTube know that I am somebody to watch. So I'll give you a few seconds to get on top of that, and then we're going to talk about my outlining process. So my process starts basically as soon as I get a nugget of an idea. Immediately, I create a Google Sheet for that project. So why do I use Google Sheets? Well, number one, I'm an accountant. So for me, Excel is life, and using a spreadsheet program totally makes sense for me. Two, using Google Sheets allows me to access it from anywhere. I have the app on my phone. I can access it on my personal computer, my work computer, wherever I happen to be in the world. As long as I can get on the internet, I can add things to this list. So essentially, this is a very rough thing. It's just an open spreadsheet, and every time I come up with an idea, I just throw it in one cell and I just write all in one cell that scene or the idea or the concept. Sometimes I try to be linear, and if it's something towards the end, I'll put it at the bottom of the list, but not always. And if I want to be real fancy, sometimes I do split it by subplot. But generally, it's just a straight list, brain dump of anything that I possibly think about this particular story. So by the time it comes to actually outline the story, I do have some scenes and concepts in my head already. A lot of them will change, and one of the things I will say up front is that my outline is a living document. I am constantly changing it, constantly updating it, and it is constantly changing. Just because I set an outline at the beginning of my book does not mean it's going to stay that way, and 9 chances out of 10, it probably won't. So I have this whole list of scenes that I have. Sometimes I have more, sometimes I have less, depending on the book and how much I've thought about it. If I get to the point where I'm outlining, I will take some time to do a little bit more brainstorming and to read through those scenes and see if anything else sparks. And then I'll add that to the list before I get started. So we're going to go into a screen share, and you're going to be able to see exactly what I do when I outline, and I'm going to talk you guys through it. So hopefully this is something that you'll be able to utilize, and if not, at least you get to see how another person gets to do it. I do like it being electronic in the sense that it is easy to access, it's easy to add to, it's easy to change. Personally, I am generally a paper person. I like to have a to-do list. I like to have a planner. I'm not really good with electronic calendars and stuff like that. But in this particular case, this is something that just makes sense and is so much easier for me to do electronically. I have printed them on many occasions, and I'll almost use it like a checklist, but I do keep it electronically most of the time. So let's get into that outline, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is what my outline would generally look like. I usually put the cover of my book, which I'm not going to show you, off to the left there, and then I'm going to write what I expect for my word count and all that sort of stuff. I haven't done the cover reveal on this, so I'm just going to ignore that for now. And then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to decide how long this book is going to be in general. So with my Faraway High series, they're usually about 40 to 45,000. So I went with 45,000 to start out with. And so if you can see on the bottom, it has 45,000 words. And then I'm going to estimate the word count per chapter. So sometimes this is really easy if you know what you're doing. If you are relatively new to this, then it might be a little bit harder. But I kind of have an idea of what my chapters are going to be in these books because I've already written 2 in this series. So I know I range about 1,500 words. This generally changes during my climax and stuff. Those ones are going to be a little bit longer. I'm going to have some other chapters that are going to be a little bit shorter. I also know that the 2 books that I have out so far have 26 and 28 chapters respectively. So if I do the math on 45,000 at 1,500, which is what I kind of figure my chapter length is going to be, gets me to about 30. So that totally makes sense for this type of book. This next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this in thirds. So if we highlight this, we can see that that's 15,000 words. 15,000 times 3 is going to get us to 45,000. Why do I do it this way? Because I use the 3-act structure. So when I go into stick my scenes in here, then I'm going to know approximately where I need to be for each of the sections in each act. Generally, it's not going to work out perfectly. I'm not going to be exactly on this green. I might finish a little bit sooner, finish a little bit later, what have you. But I'm going to know once I start slotting my scenes in if I'm relatively close. If I start slotting my scenes and I'm not getting to the end of that first act and we're somewhere down here, then either A, this book needs to be a lot longer, or B, that first act is way too inflated and I need to start moving some things around. So this is just how I would generally start to set things up. When I start writing, I will put when my actual word counts are in here, because when I do start writing chapters, it is possible that I'm going to end up going much higher than I expected to. And if that's the case, then I could end up being a little bloated or under in some of my acts. Personally, I don't fuss too much between acts 1 and 2 because act 2 usually tends to be a little bit longer for me, but not always. However, I also don't want the middle of my book to be too long either, because then that's when it ends up getting a little bit boring. So this is how I would start out. The next thing that I would do is, you see there's a column for key beat. So what I start with generally is that list of scenes that I would have created for my book already, and I would start slotting them in where I can. So if I know how the book's going to open, then that scene description is going to go in here. It could be like a mile long, but it doesn't really matter. It's just giving me that description. And then I'm going to start slotting scenes in as I think that they need to be there. The key beats can be whatever it is you want. The ones that I usually focus on are the ends of the acts. So some call them doorways, points of no return. This is basically where the story pivots. One way that I found explained to me really, really well, I can't remember who did that, but it's basically the point in the story that after that point, the story can't go back. Like there's no possible way to go back to square one. And that happens basically twice within the story. It pivots at between act 1 and act 2, and it pivots between act 2 and act 3. I'm going to put those in there as my pivot points or my doorways or whatever it is that you want to call them. And then I'm also going to put in my inciting incident, my Dark Night of the Soul, because I love writing Dark Night of the Soul. It's one of my favorite things. I'm also going to put into my climax right here. And the other thing that I have, usually when it's a longer book, not necessarily when they're shorter like this, but is the midpoint reversal. And midpoint reversal is something that I found under Fiction University. I believe it's Janice Hardy that runs that website. I'll put it in the description box below. But the midpoint reversal is essentially something that happens in Act 2 that changes the game and doesn't allow it to get boring, because it's going to either add a timer, it's going to change the way the characters interact with the story. So if you want to look that up, it is a really cool concept. And when my books are a little bit longer, I like to use that in particular because it helps with that murky middle, muddy middle problem that a lot of writers have. I struggle through the middles, and I know a lot of writers do, so that midpoint reversal really, really does help. So I've slotted in a bunch of scenes. I'm going to note the ones that are key beats. I generally know which ones are going to be my key beats. So those are the like tent posts essentially that I have within my story. So I might be putting scenes in here, and I don't necessarily mean that I'm going to fill them all out. Maybe I only have 8 scenes right now that are going to bring me to act 2. So I'm just going to fill in the ones up to 8, and then I will leave spaces where there happens to be spaces. Because first off, like I said, these estimated word counts are just estimated. There could be some chapters in here that are going to be about 2,000 words or 2,500 words instead of 1,500 because they have a lot going on. So I may still fill out this 15,000 words in less scenes. So I don't get too fussed about that. And then I'm going to slot in wherever I can. If there's pieces that are missing, then I'm going to take that opportunity to fill stuff in, or this is the point where I might do some discovery writing. If I find my act 1 is relatively solid and I kind of know where I'm going to end, I might just start writing so I can help fill in the middle. I also have lines for subplots, so sometimes instead of just doing the scene description, I will put, okay, so if I have a romantic subplot, where am I hitting with my subplots and where do they fall into these particular scenes? That makes sure that I have a full arc in every subplot, and I'm not going for, 8 chapters and not referencing the love interest if I do have a romantic subplot. If I have a second subplot, then obviously I'm going to want to do the same thing, and you can do it all the way across. You could also do that with POVs or what have you. The other thing I have here is status, because sometimes I will be working through things in pieces. Sometimes I'll write all of Act 1 and end up going back to edit it because I know I'm not going to have time to write anymore. So depending on where I am in the project and how the project is flowing is how I decide what the status is going to be. So it might just say drafting, it might say edited, it might say first pass, it might say whatever. But when I'm getting down to the nitty-gritty end, once I finish things off, I'm going to be marking that as I go. So this is something that it's really easy to print off if I needed to. These scene descriptions, obviously, if I put a long scene in here, I can make these wider if I wanted to, so I can print it out and have everything there at my disposal. So depending on whatever beat system you use, however many act structure you use, this type of system is a great way to keep track of everything that you're doing, all of your scenes, in a very, very simple way. I know a lot of people like to do character sketches and all that kind of stuff. There are other tabs you could add to add that sort of detail, but for me, I really like to focus on the story itself and how that's going to work out. I also really like math, so having these colors really makes sense to me in terms of making sure that I'm hitting things and I'm not bloating certain acts or underwriting certain acts that need to be there, and I'm fleshing things out as much as they need to be or as little as they need to be depending on where I am with things. I'll also make sure that I'm not missing any key beats as well. The other thing here too is if you are following more beats than just the act changes, then if you have your inciting incident and your inciting incident is happening down here, that's going to be a problem because you're a little bit too far into your story. If your climax is starting somewhere around here and you still have a whole third act to go, then that's going to be an issue. So it's something that's really, really visual that I can see very quickly if things are or are not working. If you ever watched my video on how to build a plot wall, it's very similar in structure, except that is more visual and you are using post-it notes and you can basically see everything all at once. This is a nice electronic way to do it, saves the planet from all of those post-it notes, and this is the way I generally like to do things. The nice thing about this too is I can set this up relatively early. So if I'm working on I have a trilogy coming up, I already have these set up for all 3 books, and there's a tab for every single book. So I can start filling in those scene descriptions as I go along, and obviously that stuff's going to change. How does this work as I go through it? Obviously, adding in the actual word counts and the word counts changing is going to make a difference over time too. And then my scene descriptions often change. I will update things or change them. The nice thing about this is if I am making big sweeping changes, I can just copy this entire tab and start over on that one. So I'm not losing my outline from before in case I need to revert back or refer back to something. I can have lots of tabs in here. When I wrote Sleepless, I think I had about 8 tabs where I had basically taken it and moved it over several times just so I could make changes and still remember exactly what I had before. And the nice thing is, if you decide that you want to add things or the book ends up being longer or whatever, it's so easy to just go insert one above, and you can add extra things in here. You can delete things in here. It's really, really easy to do that. And you can set up formulas at the bottom to track your word counts as well as to how many words you've written and how many words are already in the project. So that is basically, in a nutshell, how I outline. All right, so I really hoped you enjoyed that little bit of an insight into how I outline my books. Maybe this is something that'll work for you, maybe it won't, but I still hope that you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy this video, make sure you're hitting a thumbs up below this video to let YouTube know it's something worth watching. And if you're not a subscriber but you'd like to be, make sure you're hitting that subscription bar and the notification bell. I really appreciate you guys coming out to watch every single week, and thank you so much for doing so. I hope your writing projects are going well, and if you're not a writer and you just like to check things out, hey, that's awesome. Thanks for coming by. I'll see you all next week.